Thank you, everyone, for joining us at the March 12th Planning Commission meeting of Santa Barbara County. Please join me to begin with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Why don't we move to our TV coverage announcements, and you can continue with roll call, Mr. Villalobos.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning to the Commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSP TV at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Maria Valley, San Maria, and Orca areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSP TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website as well as the county's YouTube channel and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to roll call, Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Park.
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
And Chair Bradley.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda status report, Secretary Wilson.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, in regards to the status of our agenda today, we have 3 items on the standard agenda. The first item is the continuance of the appeal of the Director's approval of the Sentinel Peak Truck Rack project. I believe that the applicants have submitted a request for that to be continued. We can take that up when we read that in the record. And then we have the Keyside 2 Surgery Center, and then we will close out with the presentation by Long Range Planning on emergency shelter zoning ordinance amendments. I understand that staff and the applicants and opponents are ready to present on all those items today. I can move the projection report.
Yes, please.
We set a special hearing for next week, March 19th. And that is an appeal of a director's decision on a project in Orchid. It's a housing project. And then after that, our next hearing is, and that will be here in Santa Maria. So we'll be here again next week on March 19th for that special hearing. And then after that, on March 26th, we'll be back in Santa Barbara for a housing project in Isla Vista. And then we did receive word this morning that Jonathan Aboud with the Isla Vista Community Service District is willing and able to do a presentation on that date in regards to what they are doing in regards to the parking studies in Isla Vista.
On March 26th.
On March 26th.
Okay.
So we will have those items on March 26th. And then following that, we'll continue to be in Santa Barbara on April 2nd. We continue that other housing project in Isla Vista to that date. And then we have a tentative parcel map in Toro Canyon. And then on April 9th, we'll return to Santa Maria, and we have a Brick Barn Winery that wants to go from Tier 2 to Tier 3, and then we have an equestrian facility on that date. After April, we have nothing projected for April 30th, and then on May 7th, we've projected bringing the senior mobile home park overlay ordinance that we've been directed by the Board of Supervisors to draft to the Planning Commission. And then on May 14th, we had actually canceled that hearing, and then we have, the projection report doesn't show it, but we are been notified that on May 28th, Long Range Planning is going to present their 5-year capital improvement program or capital improvement plan program to the commission. And that concludes the projection report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Park, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. That brings us to our minutes, which I know Mr. Villalobos put on our dais and distributed by email. So does anybody have comments or corrections to the February 26 minutes?
And I found something if you didn't.
What?
So I found something if you didn't.
Oh, really? Okay. It's
I'm
like
testing you.
I'm not seeing anybody jump to a correction. So what was your we fix?
At the very end, the German time.
Good test. There probably are times when this commission has been here at 11:54, but not that time. Okay, great. So does anybody have a motion to approve these with that small correction?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a move to approve. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Great. Okay, that brings us to our public comment, and this is, I skipped over public comment. Sorry about that, you guys. This is the time in the agenda that if anyone wants to address the commission on items not otherwise on the agenda, you have a public comment period to do so here. I don't have any speaker slips, no one online.
No hands raised online.
Okay, then we will close that public comment period. And then move on to our informational reports by the commission. Does anybody have anything to share? Commissioner Cooney, I think you're just lit up there. All right. Okay, we're moving right along. Then now we've finished with the minutes and we'll go to the director's report and supervisor hearing summary. Do we have Ms. Plowman in the Ethernet?
You hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Madam Chair, members of the commission. I have a few things to report on board actions. On March 4th, the board took action on a couple of items. One was the historic landmark designation of the Arroyo Hondo Bridge, which is along Gaviota Coast. It's the old concrete bridge, I think that was built in the 20s and was part of the original highway. And so now it's designated as a historic landmark, and HLAC worked with Caltrans on that project. They also approved the updates to the inclusionary housing program. That's not an item that actually comes before the commission, but it goes straight to the board. And it was to bring the inclusionary housing ordinance in to alignment with what we had prescribed in the housing element update. So that was making rental projects subject to the inclusionary housing program and extending the life of inclusionary units to 90 years. And so they took action on that on the 4th, and then they took action. The second reading was yesterday. Yesterday at the board, they had a presentation from CSD, and Planning and Development participated in it. It was on battery storage projects. So a number of questions came up after the Moss Landing problem and the issues with fire there, and concerns about the contaminants that are associated with fire, and concerns about proximity of battery storage projects to residential uses or other types of land uses. So we, CSD and Aaron Briggs and Fire did a presentation yesterday talking about the battery storage projects that we have in the county. We have a couple in Carpinteria area. So I think I'm going to get this information for you really quick. Hold on. I believe Mr. Briggs is, I think, in the audience there. Probably tell us, but the Moss Landing project was quite high in terms of the megawatts that it was. And I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Briggs, you're there. Was it 500 megawatts?
Director Plowman, so the facility there is actually 4 different battery projects put together. And I believe the portion that caught fire was 300 megawatts. And then there are another 400 megawatts total. So total of 700-ish.
Yeah. Right. And so the projects that we have in Carpinteria are around 10 megawatts. We have 2, and then there's one in Cuyama, a small one in Cuyama. And then there's one the city of Goleta permitted And that is a little bit larger, Mr. Briggs. How large is that one? I don't see it in my notes here.
If I remember correctly, the City of Goleta facility was around 50 megawatts.
Megawatts, right. So the board gave some direction to CSD and Planning and Development to talk more about sort of the standards that we apply to battery storage projects. And also talk a little bit about the noticing, how much noticing we do. And then the interesting stuff that Fire presented was about the different types of batteries that they use. The battery that was used in Moss Landing is, for goodness sake, where is that? It is a, Mr. Briggs, help me. It's a nickel NCM. What is that? Nickel.
Nickel, manganese, cobalt.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's like a Trivial Pursuit answer.
Oh, you'd think I'd be more prepared. I'm sorry. And then the newer facilities, and they have a tendency to get hotter faster, which they call runway. And it's with the electricity circulating around the battery, it gets hotter faster and it can catch fire. The new lithium batteries that they're using do not have the same runway process or problem that these batteries do, and so they tend to catch fire less than the ones that were used previously. I think the one in Moss Landing was built in 2020. And they're looking at the way they develop them, making sure this one in Moss Landing was indoors. These other ones that are starting to develop are outdoors, and they're in containers and they're separated, so that each battery pack doesn't catch the other battery pack on fire. And they have automatic valves that switch them off, or automatic controls that once it reaches a certain temperature, that battery will switch off, and then they'll release steam and whatnot. So it was an interesting presentation. I learned quite a bit, and we're going to be talking internally about maybe some changes we might be making in our own code to address some of the issues related to decommissioning a battery storage project, as we're starting to see a lot more of them. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that, or have Mr. Briggs answer any questions about that.
I have a question too. Go ahead, Commissioner Park.
Just a comment. I think this is a really good thing for this discussion to be occurring. I'd like to hear some more expanded version here at the Planning Commission. I'm reminded of a Carpinteria project we had a few years ago where I objected to the requirement the ABR had for palm trees, live palm trees, to screen a cell phone tower. And one of my objections was that if you go on the California website for invasive species, it refers to the flammability of these certain kind of palm trees. And I've looked back at it now and realized it was very much in the vicinity of the battery storage project. And it's just the kind of connection we ought to be making when we look at these things. So probably that's a good idea for the Planning Commission to have a better awareness and the ABRs and so on and so forth.
I had a question just regarding the decommissioning discussion. These things are just now getting built. So is there like a presumption that they're only going to be good for 5 years? I mean, is that, or is it because they've discovered that they're a little more tricky to have existing?
So Chair Bridley, when the developers install the systems, they definitely have a lifespan in mind. I don't recall offhand what it was. It's like 15 or 20 years. And, you know, the battery technology evolves pretty quickly. And so as soon as a set of batteries are installed 5 years later, there's something better. So they realize that they have a shorter lifespan. For decommissioning, what was your question exactly?
Well, just on the ones that we've approved or that agencies are approving, do they have a term on their development plan or a CUP? I mean, I've seen them handled both ways.
To require some kind of
how long
like-
the permit's active for it to exist?
We do not have lifespans on the permits. So if the batteries end up lasting longer than they thought, they're free to do that.
Interesting. Didn't see that coming. Okay.
And Madam Chair, the board was talking about battery storage projects kind of in light of what we require for oil and gas. Because this is kind of, it's another way to provide power, right?
Right.
And energy. And so there may be some standards that we want to build into our code that treat battery storage uniquely, and it's because it's uniquely suited to that type of project.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the report.
Yeah,
If
the
I may.
other item.
Yes. Wait, Director Plowman, Commissioner Martinez?
Yes, I too would look forward to any discussions regarding these battery stations. I've had a kind of a precarious experiences with these projects, especially when they're presented to the public as solar projects. And they go under the guise of that, and the people around think it's just panels, and really it's a lithium battery. The noise from these things is very apparent. This is not a quiet production of energy. Lithium batteries there's nowhere to, let's just say, once they're used up, there's nowhere to place them. So it's becoming a big problem and a big issue. I've seen the fire plans for responding to these batteries, and it's a defensive fire plan. It's not going out there and putting out the fire, it's standing around it and letting it burn itself out, if not reigniting. So these issues, I think, are very, very special, or at least need a lot of special attention, especially for those homeowners that are around there, because I've even heard of a Senate bill going up. It's about 3,200 feet of a buffer zone from any residential areas and so forth. But look forward to those discussions. Thank you.
Thank
There
you.
is a new, I was just going to add to that. There is a new assembly bill that is being circulated. I think it's 303. And that also is trying to address sort of restoring some more local control. Their projects that were larger had an out to be approved by the state. And now, since Moss Landing, there's been legislation introduced to say, actually, we don't want that to happen. We want the local communities to have more control over the permitting of these types of facilities. They're particularly large facilities that this provision was allowing them to avoid local approval.
Okay, thank you. I got the flag from County Council. Did you want to?
Move on.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, since we're not agendized to discuss this, I'd encourage us to wrap up the director's report. And the presentation of the board was great yesterday, if any commissioners want to watch it, and then we could bring something back to further discuss it if needed.
Okay.
I do have some other things to report.
Yes, please continue, Director Plowman.
There was an item on the board yesterday about the board setting a special cannabis board meeting for Friday in advance of the 18th. And this would be sort of designed more like a community meeting, but it is an actual board hearing, in part because of how the members of the board Brown acted together on this topic. And that will be in the Carpinteria City Council chambers on Friday from noon to 2.
Thank you. Anything more on?
So just future board items. We have the cannabis item on Tuesday, the 18th. We have the Laguna Blanca appeal, which will be on April 1st. The provision of the code that we're modifying to allow art tours, also on the 1st. And on the 8th of April, there's several items. 2 of them are more or less tied to CSD, but we are participants in those, and that's the workforce housing study. That's the presentation that the board had directed CSD to develop this study and analysis for how we could expand workforce housing. And then also going forward with a pro-housing designation, which CSD is leading. And then long-range planning is presenting its 3-year work program to the board on the 8th. And lastly, we are scheduled to bring the evacuation traffic modeling briefing to the board on May 6th. And so there was an evacuation. So we've been working as part of the safety element on a model. It's basically a study and a model to determine how evacuation works in the county and sort of areas that need improvement. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody have any questions? No, not seeing any. Thank you, Director Plowman. Okay, with that, we actually move to our standard agenda. Do we want to call in item 1?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Santa Barbara County Action Network to consider case number 24 APL 10 for the appeal of the director's April 27, 2024 approval of the Sentinel Peak Truck Rack Project case number 22 LUP 199.
Okay, and as an appeal, we always begin with staff report, and then we'll start with the appellant and then the applicant, and I guess ex parte communications first before all that. Commissioner Park.
Yes, I had a phone conversation with David Booty, and there were a couple of things I informed him about that I thought he should be aware of and that I think should be in the record. And I don't know whether to mention those now or some other point. I don't really care. But county council has more wisdom on this than I do. Right?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Park, it may depend on if this hearing is continued or not. If it's continued, then anyone can add more information to the record before the substantive hearing. But if you are going to substantively hear the item today, then maybe we can talk more about the record.
Yeah. What if it does get continued, I just don't want to be considered to have sprung something on people, whatever date it is continued to. So I'd rather get the information out now. I mean, during today at some point.
Okay. Commissioner Reed.
Yes, I had a phone conversations with Patty Cook on March 6th, on March 9th, both to discuss her plans to request asking for a continuance.
Commissioner Cooney.
I had 2 conversations with Mr. Buddy about the continuance.
Sorry. I had one conversation with Ms. Buddy and Ms. Cook last week about the continuance option. So I think that concludes our ex parte. So we continue on to our staff presentation.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, before we get started, I just kind of wanted to set up why we're here today. The item initially came to the Planning Commission earlier in 2024, and your commission had directed our staff and the applicant to come up with an adaptive management plan related to trucking. We did that, came back again in early 2025, and it seemed that the commission was headed towards a denial. Asked staff to return with findings for denial. We have prepared those findings. In the meantime, the applicant has been brainstorming on what options may be available to them prior to the commission's action. And they did submit a letter requesting continuance today, and they can go into the reasons why. So depending on how the hearing proceeds, staff is happy to discuss the continuance, but we're also ready to present our findings for denial if we end up going in that direction as well. So staff is ready for pretty much anything that you would like to do today.
Okay, so the presentation actually starts with the appellant because it's still functioning as an appeal, correct?
So, Madam Chair, just
How do you want to?
my recommendation is that we take up the continuance first, and then have the Planning Commission decide whether or not they want to grant the continuance. And then based on that decision, we'll know how to go forward. And then any of the comments and things will be related to just the continuance. And then depending on how that vote goes, then we can move into the actual, if we could decide to hear it today, then we'll move with the hearing. Otherwise, we'll defer everything to when it was continued, if that's the case.
Okay. So for the continuance item, don't we want to hear from the applicant?
Madam Chair and Commissioners, yes, I would recommend that they keep their comments on the continuance only, and then we bring it back to the commission after public comment on the continuance.
And then we would also want to hear from the appellant about
Yes,
the
so it's the
continuance.
same
Okay.
procedure,
Just in
applicant,
reverse.
appellant, and
Okay.
then, but only on the continuance to start with.
Understood. So our applicant first, not the appellant. Yeah, because it's a continuance request. Mr. Buddy, please state your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is David Buddy, Environmental Health and Safety Manager for Sentinel Peak Resources. Sentinel Peak respectfully requests a continuance of this hearing. We've considered the Planning Commission's comments from the February 12th hearing and request the opportunity to evaluate these remarks, particularly the new information presented by Commissioner Park at the hearing. Sentinel Peak requests 3 months to complete this analysis. During this time, we will study the alternative route suggested by Commissioner Park to determine if it is a viable option. In addition to that, we will also review the traffic safety concerns raised by the commissioners in more detail. Sentinel Peak would like to pursue an efficient and effective use of the county's resources, and a continuance would further these objectives. These project questions are best addressed with the Planning Commission rather than an appeal to the Board of Supervisors. Sentinel Peak appreciates the work staff has invested in this project, and we value the comments made by the Commission. Sentinel Peak is committed to compliance and protecting the health and safety of our workers, the community, and the environment. We look forward to working with you on these issues and returning our employees and multiple contractors back to work. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Buddy? No. Okay, thank you. And the appellant.
Good morning, Chair Bradley, Commissioners.
Name for the record.
I'm Ken Huff, speaking for the appellant, SB Can. SB Can objects to the proposed continuance, which I learned about at 7 this morning when I opened up the packet to see if there was anything new. At your February 12th meeting, your commission upheld our appeal and directed staff to prepare findings for denial, and these were prepared. And we appreciate that the findings include specific references to accidents that we cited and that Morrell Brooks cited. And we find the findings to be sufficient to support project denial and urge your commission to adopt those findings today. SB Can is represented by the law office of Mark Shaitillo, and Mr. Shaitillo is online, and I'd like him to address you now. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair Bradley, members of the commission. Mark Shaitillo on behalf of SB Can. As Director Huff indicated, we request that the Planning Commission not continue this project, but instead proceed with the consideration and adoption of the findings that were prepared in response to your commission's prior deliberations. We don't see that there's any reason to continue this. There are no appropriate roadways, both on the local and regional level. And while there may be some angels dancing on the head of a pin concerning the local roadways, the regional roadway impacts remain significant. The materials that have been presented in the form of the environmental review document and the type of permitting that's proposed are inappropriate for the project. And we believe that it's appropriate that your commission continue on the path that was set forth at the February hearing, adopt the findings for denial, and let this proceed to the board if that's going to be the applicant's intention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shatilla. Okay, at this point, we do take public comment on this request, and so the only speaker slip I have is from Janet Blevins. And if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I appreciate the work that you do. It is very involved. It is very time-consuming, and it is even more important. The continuance is why? We have findings for denial. You've made your decision. If we continue for several months before another decision or before the findings for denial are submitted, what is that going to do for us? Climate change and its effects will be marching forward. The fires in LA were directly related to climate change, the winds of 1,000 miles an hour, or excuse me, 100 miles an hour, that everybody knows all about that. I would just urge you to continue with your findings for denial. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we have anyone online, Mr. Villalobos?
Madam Chair, no additional speakers online.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberations. Commissioner Reed.
Well, I would be in support of the request for an extension. At the conclusion of our last hearing, I had the feeling that our process had been truncated relative to our consideration of the adaptive management plan. That was the first meeting at which applicant had the opportunity to present their plan or refine it. Even a few months ago, the last adaptive management plan we dealt with was for the YMCA in Santa Ynez, and they got 2 meetings, an additional meeting to refine their adaptive management plan. So I felt that the vote to direct planning to come up with findings for denial was premature. An applicant deserved another meeting. Also, I felt that vote was based on new information which emerged at the February 12 meeting with respect to the alternative proposed trucking route and with respect to the full picture of the increase in traffic due to the new developments. Applicant was actually at one point, a statement was made critical to applicant because they did not have a traffic study, whereas in the December meeting, staff was instructed to bring back information on the new developments only so far as to indicate where the stop signs and driveways would be. So in finality, I just think the decision to require staff to come back with findings for denial was premature, and at the minimum, applicant deserved an additional meeting. Therefore, I would, at this time, fully support applicant's request for a continuance.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have some thoughts to share? Okay, seeing none. Or Commissioner Park?
Yes, I do. I've kind of been on the fence on this request, but I'm glad to hear from Commissioner Reed on this. It's been sort of an awkward matter all along in the sense that because of the sort of gerrymandered redistricting right in that area, the oil and gas plant where the truck racks are is in my district, but nothing else that we deal with here in terms of the local traffic concerns, going down Harris Grade Road and then up Cabrillo Highway, none of that's in my district. So all the impacts we've been talking about all along and that I've been taking the lead on is actually in his district. So I want to pay attention to his concerns. With respect to the new information, that's really all about my investigation of this thing and coming up with ideas. And although I like to really look and look again and look again, and that's what happens, I must have looked at the staff report and its associated documents 3 times, really examined them on traffic studies. That investigation process goes to right before the hearing. And it probably should if it results into a better solution. But the danger of that is it might reveal information that's important, but appears like it's sprung on everybody at the last minute. And I can sympathize that Sentinel might have felt that way, especially with respect to the service road as an alternate. I could be rude about it and say, well, you know about your road, it's your property, you should have figured this out. But it was new to them that we were talking about it. So I think if there is a continuance, then my concern about fairness goes away, because they will have had an opportunity to resolve, or rather to look at this more closely. I can guess that the time period they requested is in order because if they do look hard at that alternative road method, they're going to have to deal with Vandenberg at the western end. There's a little bit of it that's on Firefighter Road, and dealing with the base, getting their attention, going over issues and how to make things work will take some time. I want to bring up the 2 matters I told Mr. Buddy about, because I think they pertain to the continuance as well. And that is another general concern of mine, aside from fairness, is that the record have as much information in it as possible that's germane. And one thing I told Mr. Buddy about, he was not aware of this because he doesn't live here, but the local news services reported on an SB-CAG meeting that occurred after our Planning Commission hearing. I don't know if other commissioners saw this, but it was to consider the intersection of Santa Lucia Road and Highway 1, which is right on this route, okay? And SB-CAG voted to close down that intersection for left turns from Santa Lucia because it had been so dangerous in the past. And in fact, one of the persons who voted on it was the member of the Board of Supervisors on SB-CAG, and that's the 4th District Supervisor. So that's information that really everyone should have and should be in the record, and it is now. And I also suggested to Mr. Buddy that there was still another alternative that I didn't bring up last time. I didn't think it was necessary, but if he's going to have the time to look at these things, that he should consider. And that might be that there are internal pipelines in that oil field to get oil from each well to a gathering site. I'm sure there's better terminology for that than I've just used, but you get the idea. And that if that internal pipeline goes out on that, out to the west and is in the vicinity of where the graded pad is that Sentinel has on Firefighter Road, then it might be a place for a truck rack. So use internal pipelines to get the oil over there, put the truck rack there, and then it again avoids any use of the area that we looked at that's accident prone. So I just wanted that idea to be considered now by Sentinel so that no one thinks I sprang or sprung it on them at the very last moment in a few months.
Very helpful. Commissioner Reed.
Okay, just one last point I would like to make. I realize I have a number of constituents who are opposed to this thing, and I think we've given applicant more than ample time to present their case. So I'd just like to state that this will be the final continuance that I'll support on this. So hopefully next time, bring absolutely your best product to the hearing.
Okay. We'll see how that goes. There was someone trying to get on public comment, and there was a technical difficulty, so I'm just going to digress for a moment and take this last public commenter. It's Merrill Brooks, and then let's get back to deliberations right away.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I too only found out about this continuance at 8 o'clock this morning. I'm sitting here with my hat on and my coat on at home. And thank you for acknowledging that I am here and would like to speak. I don't support the continuance. I think that so much information was provided at the last hearing and the hearing before that and the hearing before that. I'm also concerned, there is a public meeting tonight about the Santa Lucia Canyon Road issue in Vandenberg Village. I know the public is totally unaware of this truck rack project, so that issue will be handled. And as far as I know, there was no decision made as far as the ending the left-hand turn. That certainly is a primary factor in what's going to be discussed tonight by about 5 different agencies. So again, if there had been adequate environmental review before, all this would have been in your packet and you would have been aware of it. But there are other options that are going to be presented tonight. It'll be months. It might be years before this thing is resolved. And the public has told us that. Those of us who live in Vanderbilt Village. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up. Also, for a continuance to go on, I think the public, there is I don't know if you're familiar with SF Gate. This is a blog, social media out of San Francisco, and the danger of the road of Santa Lucia Canyon intersection. It's most enlightening. I really urge all of you to read that. If there is a continuance, it's just more of the same about how dangerous these roads are and the number of fatalities just in the first 10 miles of this route. So I'd urge you not to have a continuance. I think you have enough information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Okay, so that recloses public comment. Let's go back to the commission. We heard comments from Commissioner Park and Commissioner Reed. How about anybody else on my left? Do you have inclinations?
Yes, I'd be in favor of a continuation. I mean, we grant this routinely to other applicants, and especially in the face of new ideas and new efforts. And I look at the memorandum, and it says that we considered all evidence. Well, obviously we haven't in regards to if we have some alternative routes, and that's what this issue is about, and provide them another opportunity.
Okay, Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just concerned that we're going beyond the usual limits of a continuance request. I think there are good reasons why we should have this information as long as the applicant has requested the continuance, so I'm not going to object to it, but I am very leery of taking evidence and in any way moving forward with a decision on this case beyond the date to which it's continued.
Thank you. I have a question for County Council. So the commission was very clear. I mean, we had a denial vote, and staff did what we asked and came back with denial findings. Now we're seemingly opening it back up again for additional information, even though we closed that hearing. So I guess this is allowed because people figured out there's more information they should have put in front of us earlier. I'm a little frustrated about it. I'm particularly frustrated that some of our members of the public read about it at 8 o'clock, and they've been very stalwart and, attending on time. So just explaining how this can happen, because if it happens to a lot of cases, we would never get anything done.
Right. Madam Chair, while the commission did give direction to staff to come back with findings for denial, the public hearing has not been closed yet. So there's still a public hearing today. They're able to request a continuance. It's up to the commission whether to grant it or not. And then if you move forward with the hearing, this is still another opportunity for the appellant and applicant and public to provide information about what the commission should or should not do.
Okay, so it stays open in a way, okay. Okay, then I think we've heard from, Commissioner Park, did you have something?
I'd like to add another thing. I didn't want my comments about the value of knowing about the Santa Lucia Canyon Road information in SBCAG to imply that either Sentinel or our staff concealed information from us. At the last hearing, I talked to Mr. Briggs about it, and we were both surprised to learn about this. And it's nothing staff was aware of, and that's why it didn't report it to us. And it's nothing that Sentinel was aware of. It certainly wasn't anything I was aware of. But I hope staff can keep track of it so when it comes up again, this matter, that we are aware of what SPCAG has been up to there. Same with Sentinel. I think if this is continued, we'll actually have a stronger record for denial if it turns into denial. But we'll also have, if it turns into not denial, it'll be because there's been a really good look at other ways to do this. It mitigates many of the problems. So there you go.
Okay. So did we have a date? Because that would be in the motion maker's text. And-
Madam Chair, there was a date in the memo. It was June 11th.
And I understand that the appellant is unavailable that day.
Madam Chair, yes, Mr. Chatello sent me an email, but he's online if you'd like to ask him for clarification on that.
Well, we need both parties at this hearing, so if it doesn't work for the appellant, that's 50% of the solution. Can we look at something else?
Mr. Chatello sent me an additional email indicating that the 25th would work for him. That date is scheduled for Santa Barbara, but we could always change that if necessary.
And does the commission feel like June 25th is enough time to go through this and analyze it? And
I think we should make sure they have ample time, because maybe.
like 2.5 months. Okay. Well, by the time they have to get the staff report and all that stuff done. We need to work something out, so let's just take a quick 5-minute break and look at our calendars again. Please continue. Do we have a date?
Madam Chair and Commissioners, now that we're back on record and to be able to provide information, I think the appellants are looking for information on what was discussed during the break. There are some options for the commission to consider based on the information that we've heard today from the applicants. The applicants may be considering other alternatives to their project that they've originally proposed as far as location of truck routes, or the truck rack and the different routes. So options are, and this is what we discussed with the applicant, is one, we can just remove this from the agenda. Just drop it from the agenda, and then once the applicants have analyzed the project or made any changes, then we will do the necessary analysis on that and then re-agendize it and notice it for another hearing. That's one option, is just remove it from the agenda. Number two is we could continue it to the 25th of June. However, depending on if there are any changes to the project description and additional analysis that needs to be done, we may need to continue it from the 25th because then the project description may have changed and we need additional analysis to be completed in order to make that date. So those are the options that we were discussing on the break with the applicant.
Can I ask about another option? And it's one I thought of, in that the applicant may want to revise this project, but one option is, this is kind of what I thought was going to happen, that there'd be denial, okay, then the applicant can come back with another project, not for another year, but they can, and that oil's still going to be there for a long time unless they get it out. And I don't know if that's a reasonable option because it's starting all up over again, which is a cost to the appellants, it's a cost to staff, it's a bother in general, but it is an option. So I was curious what staff thought about that.
Let me just understand, that'd be denial by the commission without an appeal to the board and allowing them to return de novo in a year?
Well, no, they may appeal or not, but they can always bring a project back a year later, and if they think they've got a better project than what was denied. I'm not suggesting that's the right way to go. It seems to me that's a lot of paperwork to stop and restart, but I just thought I should bring that up and staff should comment on it.
So Madam Chair and Commissioners, to respond to Commissioner Park, the other option is that we can just take action on the project as proposed today, which we did come back with findings for that, as Commissioner Park indicated. If they come back with a different project, they don't have to wait a year. If they come back with the exact same project, then that would be, they'd have to wait a year to come back with the same project. But if it's a different project, they wouldn't have to wait a year if they wanted to make changes.
Okay. So we have a March 25th date as an option, time certain or date certain, and then we have a dropping from the agenda. I would be inclined
or
to...
Madam Chair, or as Commissioner Park said, the other option is
take the
deny
denial.
the continuance request and just move forward with the hearing.
Okay. I'm just going to jump in here a little bit. If we're inclined to the continuance, I would say drop it from the agenda because I am fairly certain it's going to involve some project description tweaks enough that staff's going to need to look at that, figure out how it fits into environmental review, and then come back with a revised project description. I think June 25th. If they make it, okay, but I think there's more work there than maybe we realize. So open to what the rest of the commission wants to do, including moving forward with the denial findings we have in front of us today, which were good, by the way. Commissioner Reed.
I do agree with your analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with dropping it from the agenda to give the applicant ample time to come up with the best program or modifications that they can.
I would agree with that analysis.
Okay.
Has the applicant indicated they're agreeable to dropping it from the agenda? I mean, I think we need that on the record.
I'm acknowledging a head nodding, and that would be also via staff. Understood
Madam
that.
Chair, I think we should have them on the record making
Okay.
that statement.
I know, head nodding doesn't come through in the transcripts. He needs his steps anyway.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Sentinel Peak is agreeable to dropping the project from the agenda to properly analyze the alternatives that have been brought up and discussed today.
Okay. So the commission understands?
Madam Chair, just for the record purposes, we probably should hear from the appellants again
Yes.
on that.
The tip of my tongue there.
Ken Huff again. And I'm concerned that the applicant will have a good amount of time, months, to come up with something different, and then we're going to read about it a few days before a commission hearing, and that's how much time we'll have to analyze. That concerns me a lot, and I guess I'd like to give Mark Shitillo a chance to comment on it as well. If the thing is a lot different than what it was, I mean, it was already an inadequate mitigated negative declaration in our judgment, and there needs to be more environmental review if it's different.
Okay, thank you. I understand. I still think that the commission has a choice here about that, and that's just our process. And, the appellant can request a continuance as well. If you find yourself in that situation, we've granted that to appellants as well. So I think the commission needs to make a decision on this, and that means I would be looking for a motion. Mr. Shitillo, I'm sorry. This is a little unusual. I'm going to give myself a break here. Mr. Shitillo is still able to speak on behalf of the appellant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that, and I apologize for not being in Santa Maria this morning, given the nature of the discussion. So I appreciate your accommodating my remote participation. I would join with the comments that Mr. Huff made with respect to the fairness and specifically the opportunity to have adequate and ample time to review project changes and so forth. So it may be that we would request that the planner keep the appellant informed as there are submittals to be able to be prepared and not have materials submitted just the week before the hearing. That would be one potential way to ameliorate that concern. We actually would prefer, of course, that the commission does deny and provide the applicant the opportunity to reformulate their project, reconsider environmental review and permitting as well. As we've noted in our appeal materials, we believe an oil drilling and production plan is required before a land use permit can be issued for the project. That's the decorum that we think is appropriate for the processing of this project. But the indefinite continuance to allow a reformulation of the project is probably the second best alternative to an out-and-out denial at this point, with the request that we have some direction from the commission to staff to keep the appellant apprised and provide copies of new material as it's submitted, so we don't have to go through the rigors of doing Public Records Act request in order to receive documents as they're submitted iteratively to staff with respect to a revised or reanalyzed project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shitillo. Okay, so with that, I think we are looking for a motion to drop this from the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to drop this from the agenda indefinitely so the applicant can address some of the commission's concerns and keep staff informed, and staff keeping the appellant informed as best they can. So,
Can I just ask staff
sure
about this? I'd just like to if staff has a preference or can tell us the pros and cons of dropping from the agenda as opposed to denial and then bringing a new project. Seems to me that bringing a new project is more paperwork, but maybe I'm missing something. I'm looking to anybody who wants to address that.
So, Commissioner Park, through the chair, so dropping it from the agenda allows the applicant to just continue, make modifications to the existing application. A denial would then require them to restart, resubmitting paperwork, redoing fees.
It's a lot more work for staff.
Basically restarting the whole process over again. Dropping it from the agenda just allows us to continue forward with existing application and fees and all that structure that's already set up. So it streamlines the process as far as the staff time that has to take to process application material.
Is there a way to keep folks apprised of the progress? What I would hate to see happen is we get this so many months down the road, and then right at that hearing, there's a big question as to what kind of environmental review. I guess that can happen on any project at any time, but it might be something, you know. This might have more biological consequences if it takes a less dangerous route, you know. So that'll be something that'll have to be looked at. And I sure hope that everyone gets a chance to think about this, you know, more than 48 hours before the hearing.
Commissioner Reed.
I would just like to suggest, can we ensure that the motion includes wording to indicate that at such time as applicant requests the item be re-agendized, there is assurance that planning department notifies the appellant early enough prior to the hearing to afford them time to make a robust review and prepare a comment?
I'm going to jump into this conversation because I appreciate the appellant's position, but this is our process, and frankly, it's hard as an applicant, it's hard as an appellant. You just have to stay on your toes. I apologize about the late notice and late discovery this morning, but I wouldn't support that because that's putting our staff in yet another communication path that is unnecessary. It's the appellant's job and it's the applicant's job to stay in touch with staff. The Public Records Act request is certainly knowledgeable by Mr. Shatillo and everybody on the appellant side. So I'd let that process in terms of communication from staff as to resubmittals and everything stay as is. I don't want to burden one more thing on staff over this. That would be my position on that particular topic. I'm happy to have it drop from the agenda and let it come back to us in its normal fashion.
And Madam Chair and Commissioners, I think we'll follow procedures as the chair's indicated. Being that this is dropped from the agenda, it does require renoticing. And so then renoticing occurs the 10 days prior to the agenda or to the hearing. So the concern or fear of items being submitted late or the day before the hearing, it'll follow our procedures, which is we docket a staff report and a memo, and noticing goes out ahead of time. Where appropriate, then we can coordinate as needed, but we'll follow the procedures that's set forth in the ordinance.
Okay. So with that, do we have a motion to drop intact? I think we did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it get seconded?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Martinez. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Cooney.
I am going to vote with the majority on this, but with the comment that we're building a different process. So any future applicant who is facing findings for denial could say, I'd rather just have it dropped from the agenda and we'll start over again. We haven't had that procedure, and it's being adopted today rapidly and without a lot of thought, and that concerns me, but I'd rather have it dropped from the agenda than continue to battle over the specific findings that we have presented.
So that was a yes?
It was.
Okay.
I started with the yes and then said, I'm concerned about the vote of the commission.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Park.
Just
I'm going to vote yes. I have kind of a different point of view from Commissioner Cooney, but I don't think now's the time to spell it out. I've seen a lot of examples where I thought commissioners changed their vote pretty short order, and we did have things like this. But that's neither here nor there. What matters is the motion before us, and if I remember what it is, I'm voting yes on it.
Commissioner Reed.
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez.
Yes.
Chair Bradley.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to take a little bit of a break to let staff change out. Can we give us 5 minutes? What does staff need? Yeah. 5 our meeting of March 12th of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission, and that brings us to item 2 on our agenda. Mr. Villalobos, do you want to read that into the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of the owner, Taylor Judkins, to consider case numbers 24 AMD 9, 24 CUP 19, and 24 LLA 2, and to determine that the previously accepted addendum to the Certified Orchid Community Plan OCP Environmental Impact Report 95 EIR 1 is adequate environmental review for case numbers 24 CUP 19, 24 AMD 9, and 24 LLA pursuant to section 15162 of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you. And this is where we ask the commissioners to disclose any ex parte communications. Does anybody have anything to report? Commissioner Martinez, your light's on. Commissioner Martinez?
Oh.
None. Okay. All right. Then we proceed with our staff report.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Soren Kringle, and I will be presenting the Keysight 2 Ambulatory Surgery Center Development Plan Amendment and Lot Line Adjustment. The project site is located on Keysight 2 in Orchid off Clark Avenue near Highway 101. For some background, the Orchid Gateway Retail Commercial Center project, which approved the existing development on the site, was approved by the County Planning Commission in 2019. The project allowed for the subdivision of Keysight 2 into 4 legal lots, over 40,000 square feet of retail commercial development, including a 28,000 square foot grocery store, a gas station, a drive-through Starbucks, and a 7,000 square foot detached commercial building. A site plan with 4 lots is shown here, and the project before you today is located on the green and the yellow lots. And here's a photo simulation of the 2019 approved project. At this point in time, the shell of the 28,000 square foot grocery store, which if you can see my cursor is right there, has been constructed, and the proposed ambulatory surgery center will be located approximately right here where this red star is. The proposed project is a request for 3 entitlements, a lot line adjustment between the green and the yellow lots that were shown before, an amendment to the 2019 approved development plan to allow for a new commercial suite and exterior alterations, and a major conditional use permit to allow for the use of the surgery facility. Here's a graphic from before showing the 4 lots created in 2019, and here is approximately what the proposed lot line adjustment will look like, which will transfer approximately 25,000 square feet from the green parcel to the yellow parcel. This will allow the proposed surgery center to be located on a separate parcel than the existing grocery store, and shown there in that black outline. As mentioned earlier, the proposed development is essentially a tenant improvement within an already constructed building shell. The only new development involves the construction of new rooftop mechanical equipment, a relocated trash enclosure, and an emergency backup generator that will be located within a level 4 enclosure for sound attenuation. The trash enclosure was reviewed and approved by the Resource Recovery and Waste Management Division, and the generator was approved and reviewed by APCD, who provided a condition letter that was included as an attachment to the staff report. Additionally, an acoustical study analyzed the noise output from the generator and the rooftop equipment and confirmed that neither would generate greater than 65 decibels at the nearest property line. Finally, the project has attended NBAR for conceptual review, where it received positive comments and was asked to return for preliminary and final approval once it's received approval from this commission. The operation of the surgery center itself will be a joint venture between Cottage Health and individual surgeons. And at its maximum, the center will employ up to 30 people, with its standard hours of operation to be between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. The facility will contain 14 operating rooms and 14 pre-op and post-op recovery bays. Staff analyzed the proposed project for consistency with both the Santa Barbara County Comprehensive Plan and the Orchid Community Plan. Additionally, the proposed project meets all applicable development standards from the LUDC. Given the minimum exterior development that's proposed, the project remains consistent with height limits, setbacks, and parking. And in fact, the parking demand study was provided And it shows that the surgery center will require 11 less parking spaces than the previous use in that location. And furthermore, the project site is currently overparked by 98 spaces from the previous project. Staff relied on CEQA 15162 to exempt the project and concluded the proposed project will not create new significant environmental effects that were not previously analyzed by the addendum to the OCP that was prepared for the original project on the site. And as mentioned throughout this presentation, the applicant has supplemented staff with a number of studies that only confirmed our findings. If you agree with staff's assessment, we recommend that you make the required findings for approval of the project, determine that as reflected in the CEQA findings, the documents are adequate environmental review, and approve the project. Case numbers 24 CUP 19, 24 AMD 9, and 24 LLA 2, subject to the good conditions of approval. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kringle. Does the commission have questions? Mr. Reed, Commissioner Reed, I see your light on first.
Right. Hello, thanks for the presentation. I have a couple of questions here. I noticed the one thing that's rather unique to this project we haven't seen before is the wall between the new surgery center and the interior of the grocery store. I mean, it's referred to as a party wall. Is that really a shortening for partition wall?
Commissioner Reed, through the chair, I believe in the building code it's referred to as party wall, and that's where we pulled.
Party wall.
Yeah,
Sure. Okay, so it's essentially non-load bearing, divides that space into two separate rooms, correct? What's the construction of that wall, the material? Is that part of your review?
I'm not sure the material. I just know that it had to meet a fire rating
Right.
for building standards that exceeded like a typical wall.
I'll come back to that when I'm talking to applicant because I have a question relative to that. Okay. The parking studies. You show obviously there'll be fewer visitors due to the fact it's not a grocery store. But, I would assume that since it's a surgical center, the time at which clients remain in those parking spaces will be, relatively longer than the customers of a grocery store. That was that taken into account in the parking evaluation?
Yeah, we might. Commissioner Reed, through the chair, I think we'll defer that to the applicant.
Okay.
I will say that, as I mentioned in the presentation, the site, regardless, the site does have, I believe it's like 98 extra parking spaces per what is required by the LEDC.
Right. I mean, it looks like there's more than adequate parking. That was a thought that had come to me. So they're going to have the new backup generator. It will be it appears to be sufficiently sound isolated from neighboring properties.
That's correct. So, Commissioner Reed, through the chair. So that generator is approximately 20 feet from the nearest property line, and it's within what's called a Tier 4 sound enclosure, which, to my understanding, is the highest level of enclosure for sound attenuation. And again, the noise study that was included as an attachment confirmed that it was going to be less than 65 decibels at the nearest property line.
Okay, so with respect to the particular requirements of the party wall for easements, for fire, et cetera, for both of the tenants, was that reviewed by county fire? Was that found acceptable?
Commissioner Reed, through the chair, that condition or requirement came from our building staff who, okay, like I mentioned, the shell of the building had already been constructed, and the applicant came in for this project, and that's why they were able to catch it so early on in the process. So we were able to incorporate that requirement into our conditions for the lot line adjustment. That's
okay.
Part of this project.
I appreciate the fact it was later in process because I've been driving by wondering when grocery outlet was going to open. This explains that part of it for me. All right, and then the medical waste disposal plan is up to all code or regulations.
Commissioner Reed, through the chair. Yeah, I think that I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Okay.
But for LEDC requirements, it was compatible or consistent with what we've seen on other medical facilities in the county.
Okay, that concludes what I have for you. Thank you.
Commissioner Park?
I just want to kind of get located here geographically. Former Commissioner Blau had a development project that was just to the west of this, right?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, that would have been Key Site 4, yes,
That's right. Okay. And it was actually built out.
correct.
And does it have a cannabis dispensary in it? Didn't we approve one there?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, it does.
Okay. And I'm confused about one thing, and that is, why does this require a conditional use permit?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, it all depends. It's all because of the use. Medical services requires a major conditional use permit pursuant to the LEDC and retail commercial zone districts. So yeah, the use is what's requiring it.
So there are other districts where you can have medical that don't require a conditional use permit?
Possibly, off the top of my head, I'm not sure which one.
I mean, we had this in Goleta where we had a continuing series of projects over dance studios, karate studios, rock climbing walls, and we got rid of conditional use permits for them, but not for medical. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. And so it actually requires us to make that finding. I don't know what it is in these findings. It's usually 2.1.5, that it's not detrimental to the welfare and health of the neighborhood and is not incompatible with the neighborhood or something. I've kind of made a word salad out of that, but you know what I'm referring to. And so what's the breadth of the community we're supposed to be looking at here? What's served by this parking lot, or all of these key sites, or all of Orchid, or the Santa Maria Valley? What are we looking at here?
You got it? Okay. Commissioner Park, your discretion, community. I mean, this is part of the Orchid community. This is in the Orchid community plan. This is a key site in the Orchid community. This is an approved commercial shell of a building. This is a permittable use in that zone. You have a lot of different variables you can take into account here. But I would say the Orchid community.
Well, then when we look at compatibility, do we look at medical uses in the community and what this provides or what it competes with and things like that?
From a land use code perspective, Commissioner Park, we're looking, we don't get into business operations all that much. We're just looking at the use. Is it permittable? And can we make the findings to support that use going into that location? But we're not looking at their types of customers we don't ask those questions, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a store, whether it's a medical clinic.
Okay. Well, thanks. I have no further questions right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinez?
Commissioner Park just reminded me of something, and in the development of that project, which you refer to as the Blau development, I recall that in their development that they were using some of the parking from this site. Am I wrong? Is my recollection wrong? I thought they were using some additional parking from Key Site 2 in their development.
Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, I'm happy to look into that, but I don't have that recollection.
Commissioner Martinez, I don't have that recollection either. I think the other site was overparked as well.
It was overparked, yeah. And that reminds me that they had some kind of understanding with this key site in regards to it. So that's one question I will be asking then in regards to it. But the other issue is that in this parking study, we have 30 employees. I know that when I'm thinking of the number of trips, yes, the number of trips will be 451, but wouldn't the increase in the employees be indicative of more stationary parking? In other words, you're going to have a parked car there from 7 to 5 or 8 to 5, rather than the transitory of somebody coming in, getting their groceries and moving on. So the 451 trips may be reduced, but don't we have more stationary parking with the increase in employees?
Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, I think that the grocery store use was anticipating a lot more, I guess, users to come in and utilize the parking lot versus the ambulatory, which didn't anticipate as many customers or people utilizing the parking lot. And again, from the traffic report, we're seeing 8 to 10 additional employees on site. Okay.
10 to 15.
Yeah, but the employee comparison in the traffic study says that this surgery center would normally be staffed by 20 to 25 employees with a maximum capacity of 30 employees as a worst case. And then for the portion that would have been previously a grocery store would have required 12 to 15 employees for that amount of square footage, so a net increase of 8 to 10 additional employees on site.
Oh, because I'm reading in the report that it is anticipated to require 10 to 15 more employees than what would be required for that portion of the structure as a larger grocery store. That's from page 5, or page 6, I'm sorry.
It may have been that we were going with the worst case assumption there to provide, a worst case picture, but what the traffic engineer summarizes what I just read.
Commissioner Martinez, in addition, I'm looking at the traffic trip generation study, attachment G. This proposed use is actually going to result in a decrease in on-site parking demand by 11 spaces. And that is on page, I don't see page number.
7 to 8 of attachment G.
Okay, thank you.
Well, no, that's actually the charts, but yeah.
Yeah, table 2. So we're looking at this use is going to actually result in a reduced demand for parking, and the site is already overparked. So staff's response to the parking issue is there is no identified parking issue by this proposed use going into this location.
Okay.
Based on the data provided.
And the reason I'm asking so many questions about this parking is I recollect that development of the site next to it, there was a lot of concerns from the neighborhood about parking. So, okay.
Okay, well, we'll try and see. My recollection is Quayside 4 was also overparked, but we'll try and find out.
Okay.
Okay, we just got to hunt that.
Because I was with the left turn and people were turning into the stall and they said they were going to be going into causing traffic and they were going to be parking in their neighborhoods. That's what I recall from in regards to the past from that project. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I think my recollection on that conversation, I think it had to do with an appeal of that cannabis project located in Quayside 4. And I think the conversation was at that time that there was sufficient parking on Quayside 4. However, if there was additional demands, there was options for our clients to park at Quayside 2 once it was developed to address that concern.
That's what I was recalling in regard to my own. There was some involvement with regards to Quayside 2 parking. Thank you.
But as far as staff's concerned, there's not like an off-site parking agreement to that effect. Okay. Commissioner Park?
Oh, I was just going to state what Mr. Wilson did. It was that cannabis dispensary project, and neighbors expressed the concern that people would be parking in the street behind the centers, and that we had a lot of discussion about kind of cross parking, and ultimately, Mr. Martinez, you voted against that. I remember that too. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions and no questions of staff, then we will go to the applicant's presentation. Can you do this in 10 minutes, Ms. Jones?
Yes,
Thank you.
probably quicker. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Heidi Jones. I'm a land use consultant for the project today. Oh, I do. I think Mr. Villalobos is pulling it up now. I want to thank staff for their presentation and their assistance through the application review process. If we can click to the next slide, please, David. we'll wait for the screen issue resolution. Oh, thank you. I'm here today with our project team, which consists of several management components from Cottage Health and Goleta Valley Professional Buildings, including Kevin Davidson, Scott Allen, and Nick Henderson. Our architect, Darcy Hernandez with Boulder Associates, is online, and her associate, Alan Kumitz, is here for questions. Scott Shell, our transportation engineer, is also online, and we're joined by Taylor Judkins, who's the owner-developer of the project. As staff went through the proposed project, it's pretty straightforward. I won't duplicate all of the details. The project background, as you know, is approved in 2019, requires some tenant improvements. The ASC shell is under construction, and minor interior improvements are needed, so I already said that. We have gone through a fairly quick application process, completed the review in 2 rounds, and we're deemed complete in October. The ASC facility and operations will be a multi-specialty, here we go, outpatient surgery center, providing services for orthopedics, spine, general surgery, ear, nose, and throat, pain management, and podiatry. As staff mentioned, it will employ up to 30 employees when fully operational, with business hours from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., with patient preparation and recovery available before and after business hours. It will also include sterile processing, storage, reception rooms, waiting rooms, and administrative spaces, in addition to the operating rooms and surgical bays. With that, I want to pass this on to Mr. Kevin Davison, who will discuss the ASC demand and community benefits.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Kevin Davidson, Vice President of Ambulatory Services with Cottage Health, and we can go to the next slide. I'll just speak briefly to the demand here. Oh, it's okay. Oh, sorry. So the ASC is intending to serve about 2,000 patients per year. These are going to be patients primarily of the partnered surgeons at the surgery center. Currently, we have 7 surgeon investors, as well as some others in the community that will perform cases at the center. They estimate about 22,000 patients currently that they care for come from the North Santa Barbara County region and beyond. And it's expected that this center will provide a much easier access, because those patients are currently now traveling to Santa Barbara to get their surgeries from surgery centers down in the city of Santa Barbara. So this is really intended to close a market need in that community, as well as provide some options for patients who otherwise would be traveling from out of the area. We can go to the next slide. I'll just comment a little bit on surgery centers in general. This is really an important part of the healthcare continuum. Hospital care is serving the most acute care needs. Surgery centers are really growing in their ability to meet the needs of lower acuity care for the community. And we've seen, just at Cottage Health, we've seen a significant growth over the last several years, about 40% growth in the surgeries that are coming from this region. So being able to kind of continue to meet that need is an important part of this strategy, and an important part of putting a surgery center at this location. Dr. David Quincy, who's here with me, we can probably answer some questions if the commission has any questions about the need or the benefit, but it really is a lower cost of care setting. This surgery center will be contracted with all the major payers, including Medicare, CenCal, Medi-Cal, and commercial insurances, so it'll really provide a full scope of access for all the patients in the community. And with that, I guess I'll turn it back to Heidi.
Thank you. Here's a little bit different graphic for the siting. The ASC is shown in white, and the proposed generator location just adjacent. The lot line adjustment, I think we've covered, but it really is to facilitate the separate tenancy. Our owner can also speak to the constructability if you have further questions about that, but it was a requirement by the building department for fire, life, and safety systems and utilities during operations. The emergency generator is a 200 kilowatt standby generator within a sound enclosure. It's fully screened. There are no acoustic impacts based on the technical study that's provided in your agenda packet. No health risk assessment considerations, and it's carefully cited in relationship to adjacent utilities, which was a bit constraining. Traffic generation and parking, we briefly talked about that. Again, we have Scott Shell with ATE on the line if you have questions about parking demand, trip generation. But our parking requirement is met, and the parking demand is met, and the site is overparked. We spoke about the support from NBAR review. And we are in agreement with the proposed conditions of approval, believes there's adequate CEQA findings, and a complete staff report. Our team's here if you have questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Does anybody have questions for the applicant? I do. But Commissioner Reed, you go first.
You can go ahead if you
Okay. I'm honestly confused about the lot line adjustment configuration. And on your slide 10, maybe someone can outline it for me. I thought lot line adjustments had to kind of stay contiguous with how it's shaped. So you're taking away the two, there we go.
I think staff's graphic was a little bit better because it had the larger context of the other parcels. If you want to pull that up, the existing line here is in blue, and the yellow is the new line. But I think staff had a good graphic in this regard.
I mean, the end goal is to create this rectangle for your surgery center, right?
Right. It's really just to kind of separate the tenancy and the boundaries between the existing shell and this ASC use within it. That makes sense?
So the yellow lot that's shown is being extended to align with the red outline, and the green is getting smaller, and it's, you know, what is that? Eastern property line is shifting over to the red.
That's correct.
Okay. So lot 1, I guess,
the
you know,
green.
I'm still looking at the wrong thing. I should,
Lot 1 remains the green area, and then the portion of green in the red outline will be pulled over to Lot 3, yellow
Okay.
area.
Okay, so that you grab all the parking, right?
Portion.
Okay, that's,
And the parking on this whole site is under a shared parking agreement for just this key site.
okay. Okay, that was my question. Commissioner Reed?
Okay. Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. I just, well, a number of questions. I'll start out with a simple one. That party wall, what's the construction material for that party wall? Is it typical steel studs and sheetrock, or is it more substantial?
I'll have the owner come in and explain the details of the construction of the wall.
Hi, I'm Taylor Judkins, the owner, developer, and the builder of the project. So it actually ends up being, so first of all, it was done in advance in conjunction with the building official and the fire marshal. They gave us feedback on how they wanted us built, and what's built actually exceeds what's required by the building code. And so it's actually 2 partition walls, and they are done with steel studs. Actually, part of the wall is CMU, which is block, and then the remaining half is steel studs. Each side of each wall is covered with Type X drywall, which is fire rated. So each wall itself is independently rated at 2 hours. And so there's one wall, then a 6-inch air gap, and then another wall. So the new lot line actually runs down the 6-inch air gap. So each side is actually structurally and fire independent from one another.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. I'm also glad to hear part of it is cinder block. Is that what you're
Yes.
referring to?
Yep.
Yeah, because I was concerned, I was certain it would meet the fire code. I was also a bit concerned as far as security, in terms of somebody being able to break into the medical
No,
clinic.
so the top 12 feet,
Yeah.
the bottom 12 feet is all CMU.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah, because I was, everybody knows you have pain control meds and things like that in the
Yeah.
clinic, and I could,
You cannot access their building from the other
not
one.
through that wall.
No.
Good. Only through an exterior wall or the
Correct.
roof. Okay, that satisfies that question. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
In terms of the other physical aspects of the building itself, I'm, pretty well satisfied. I do have a number of questions, though, probably best directed to Mr. Davidson about your operations. And what's going to occur inside of that building. And hey, to start off, I have nothing but the highest respect for Cottage Health and the level of care they extend. I remember, which has a long, long history. I remember back in the 50s going there with my grandparents to their physicians who were all there, and to Cottage Hospital, I believe, which in that time was a row of Spanish-style buildings down Pueblo Street, a lot like the nursing building that still remains there on Bath Street. So got a long history. The 2 surgeries I've ever had in my life were down at Cottage. But the last one of those was a couple of decades ago. So it was always a leader in the county, in the state, and if not the nation, because in that time, our medical delivery system in this area was, a much simpler and definitely not of the caliber of care it affords today. So things have moved ahead, and we're glad to see that. I had a couple of questions. At one point, you mentioned that the group thus far, which seems to be principally a group of orthopedic surgeons, although at some point you do intend to have multiple specialties involved in surgery. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, because at one point you stated you kind of target 2,000 patients seen per year.
Yeah, that's correct. The current surgeons are expected to bring about 2,000 cases. The surgical group, the initial group is 7 surgeons. They're expanding their group. They'll be adding probably 2 additional orthopedic surgeons who will office in this region. And then collectively, that would support the 2,000 surgical patients per year.
Okay, because I noticed among your group, I have a letter I'm going to refer to a couple of times from time to time as a proof source. I don't know if you got a copy of it. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it. It came to Bob Nelson from Ron Werft.
Yes.
Let me just interject. Is that part of our public comment for today? Because we have to vote that into the record, by the way, because it's
Okay.
longer than a page long.
Just
So
gonna-
before maybe we can just do that quickly now so that it's part of the discussion. Can we get a motion to accept the Cottage Health letter dated February 26, 25? Is there a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Hold on, when did it come?
I brought it in this morning.
Oh.
Simply-
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's longer than a page, so we have to go through this. Sometimes, mostly, it does not get accepted. So why don't we do,
It was on.
pardon me, why don't we do a roll call vote on that?
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Chair Bradley.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you for that pause. Go ahead.
Okay, so he just listed, Ron Werft listed the, names of 6 different orthopods that appear to be from the same medical group down on 511 East Bath. Now, I notice among 2 of them, they have now, or at one time, apparently had satellite offices in Santa Maria.
They have an office in Solvang
Okay, but
at this time.
a couple of them have Santa Maria addresses, too.
Yeah,
When I did a
can't-
Google.
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
They may do some temporary officing from time to time.
Yeah, I was just trying to assess whether or not they actually have ties to the medical community, the local community up here.
They do, yeah, and they certainly see a lot of patients from this region. I think they see about 66,000 patients in their practice currently, and about a third of them come from this region.
So do any of them thus far have privileges at Marion?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's pretty
And,
well.
and it's there's 7 surgeons listed in that letter, and then there's an additional 2 that would be planning to locate here. I'd imagine that the surgeons that would be more permanently located here would seek privileges at Marion.
Well, that would be a benefit. In terms of the other surgical specialties, what are your plans to recruit them to use this center, and where are your target areas for that?
Yeah, the surgeons, the 7 surgeons mentioned here have met with a number of surgeons in the community that they are familiar with and have relationships. And really, the surgery center will be open to any surgeons in the community. It's not exclusive.
So even local surgeons in Santa Maria will be able to use that facility?
That's correct.
I find that reassuring. I don't want to get too personal into your business, but what's typically your payer mix? Most clinics and facilities in Santa Maria have about 30% Medi-Cal or CenCal, as it were.
Yeah, that's probably in the right ballpark. I would say for the orthopedic practice, I can't speak to their specific numbers, but roughly, I think we estimated about 25% CenCal Medi-Cal patients, and it tends to skew a little more Medicare in terms of the utilization of surgical services, particularly for orthopedic
cases.
Just
because I noticed you have 3 urgent care centers in Santa Maria.
We do.
One Orchid, one on Skyway, and then one, of course, on North Broadway in 93458, that zip code, which would be obviously much heavier Medi-Cal patient population, I would anticipate. I was also, I just had a question as to why when you were selecting where to put this center, you happened to put it in the most affluent, most well-insured, and least diverse area of the general community.
Well, I think we were trying to serve a wide geography. We know that there's patients of this particular practice that come from San Luis Obispo all the way down to the San Ynez Valley. Being in Orchid is conveniently located in an area where there really isn't any other surgery centers between Solvang and Santa Maria. So that led to, I think the conclusion that for convenience for both the patients and the providers that are providing care, this is a great location. It's right off the freeway, easy access, and provides, adequate facility space. And it was a new property that would service a 12,000 square foot center.
Okay, I noticed one of the surgeons that mentioned in Mr. Wirt's letter is a hand surgeon.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's certainly something that's been lacking in this area.
Yeah, it's a gap definitely in the market.
Oh yeah, because Associated Hand was pretty much the closest, I believe, and that was down in Solvang.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. So you would anticipate a pretty balanced group of payers. More typical to this area, you can be taking your share of Medi-Cal.
That's right.
Because, there's been a long-standing concern in the medical community here. And we'd heard about, what's the surrounding area? Well, in my former career, we always referred to MSAs, Metropolitan Service Areas.
Mm-hmm.
So for this area, for example, the MSA would be Orchid, all of Santa Maria, perhaps Napomo, and the anchor of that would be Marion. And your MSA would be, Goleta through Carpinteria, with Cottage being kind of the core of that MSA. So we have this coming in on the border, and it naturally would create apprehension on some members of the local provider community that it would look like, hey, Cottage is establishing this outpost up here. And I think it's pretty well accepted that these outpatient surgery centers are some of the most profitable, is what I will use, for lack of a better term, areas of endeavor for community hospitals, since most of your patients are elective, well-insured, fee-for-service, or even that occasional rare one, cash pay. So much more profitable than setting up your basic medical committee. And I think that's generated some degree of apprehension on the part of some of the medical community that perhaps Cottage was using this as an outpost to skim off some of the more highly reimbursed patients. So I think the fact that you plan on accepting CenCal, a proportionate share to what the other providers are doing, I think that makes it more palatable, and I think really supports your argument that you're really looking at supporting the general community. So
Yeah, I'll just comment that Marina Owens at SynCal seemed pretty enthusiastic about the center and the ability to offer more options for access to patients. So definitely something that we're very much in support of as well. I think we tend to think that bringing more surgery capacity to the community will give greater access for patients and access to high quality services.
Well, I know.
I just want to remind our commission that we're still in questions, so are you getting there?
I'm getting there. All
Okay.
right. So actually, I think right now that concludes my comments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Don't leave. There's a few more probably. Commissioner Martinez?
Yes, in regards to the parking situation, and we'll use this, what's up here, lot line adjustment, this lot that's outlined in red. So the shared parking agreement is amongst the tenants within that red border, correct?
Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, my understanding is that the whole of Keysite 1 has an existing shared parking agreement for all 4 lots.
Okay. So then my next question is, I'm looking at, so we have the portion of the grocery store. What is located in the building adjacent to, I would say, to the east of it? What business is that? Yes, yes, yeah.
It's a shell. Yeah, it's a shell for right now, a tenant to be determined.
Okay, I just want to make sure that this surgery center is not going to move into that, because then that would expand even more parking, permanent parking in my mind. Okay, those were my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Martinez, just to follow up on your parking questions, for Keysite 4, they were overparked. So they were required to have 33, and they provided 60. And so again, I just want to stress, like, both projects, Keysite 4 and this one, they have not only met the county's parking requirements, but they have exceeded what we require.
What is the county parking requirements? Is like so many parking spaces per square feet?
Yeah, it's dependent on the use. Soren or Shannon, do you know that off the top of your head? Sometimes it's 1 per square footage, or sometimes it's based on the use, but we can try and break that down for you.
Yeah, because that interests me, because that's why I was asking, what is that empty shell used for?
Right.
Which is it is it going to be a liquor store or
Yeah.
whatever? I mean,
And whenever it is proposed to be developed, whatever the use is, we would have to take the calculation from the code and see if there's enough parking on site, or if it would somehow trigger a use that would say, like, okay, we're gonna have to find more parking. So we do that for every person that comes into a shell, into a shopping center like this.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so the statement that it's overparked for right now is based upon the present indications of use of those sites that are going to be occupied, and it doesn't include that, which is that little space marked Lot 3, because we don't know the use of it, right?
You don't know the use, but I do think that when we approve the maps and the uses with the DVP, we anticipate the types of uses that are going to be that are permittable in a commercial center, and so those parking spaces, it's not going to vary much from what was approved, and it is unlikely that there's going to be something going in there that would just make this thing not conforming to the parking. It's very unlikely.
Okay. And this next question is for my own edification, is based on what I said earlier in regards to the whole cannabis appeal thing. Is there any parking agreements between this, what we're calling Keysite 2 and Keysite 4?
There are not.
Okay.
Yep.
But I just need the applicant to assure me of that.
Well, I have not
Okay.
reviewed those, but no, that's my understanding based
No,
on
there is
staff's
there is
expertise.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have something to add about parking. So when you look at a shopping center, there's a shopping center parking rate because you assume there's an organic variety of things, whether it's a coffee shop or whether it's a dress shop or whether it's a, hair cutting studio. So that's usually how these kinds of things are starting out. And then when we have the surgery center, then you look a little deeper, which is why we have the AT report doing the parking demand thing. So anyway, Commissioner Park?
I had some questions about your slide presentation, and these are also a conundrum for me because I'll look at slide presentations in general, and sometimes I think the applicants have information on it that's intended to sway us, but isn't necessarily land use type information we deal with.
Okay.
But I always figure it's fair game to ask if you put
Sure.
it
What
in
slide
there.
do you want to look at?
So I think it's 6 and 7.
I don't know my
on the
numbers here.
ambulatory.
This one?
That's the first one. So looking at the fourth bullet point, there's no alternative options existing between Solvang and Santa Maria. I guess it means there's no hospitals in Los Alamos. I mean, I'm being sarcastic. Let me go on. So, but limited options in Santa Maria. Are there no other ASCs in Santa Maria? Does Marion not have one?
Sorry, the comment was that it's between Solvang and Santa Maria, there's no other surgery centers. There are surgery centers in Santa Maria proper, but there's nothing that's in the Orchid community or in the surrounding areas that are south of Santa Maria. And the one surgery center that operates that's multi-specialty is the Marion Center. There's 2 other centers that I know of in Santa Maria that are both ophthalmology focused, so only seeing eye cases, which isn't really what we're planning to service.
And so when you say on the next slide that existing ASCs cannot meet current patient demand, you're including the one at Marion.
That's correct.
That it cannot meet patient demand.
Yeah, not at the great growth rates that we're projecting over the coming years. I think it's a lot of why we see many cases coming down to the city of Santa Barbara right now, as there's a lot of patients who are seeking care outside of the area. And we'd like to try to get care a little closer to home.
You know, you probably didn't want to listen too closely to the matter that was before you, but at a prior hearing, we received information that area of Santa Maria expects to receive a 40% increase in traffic by 2031. I'm referring going up Broadway, so probably be more people needing orthopedic care and other, no doubt. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. I'm sorry, it's probably for your predecessor. So the ownership of this, I'm familiar with someone who invested in this a long time ago, and I know they become very necessary. But essentially, it's not owned by Cottage Health. It's by an LLC that's comprised of your surgeons. So it's their
Cottage Health, Cottage Medical Foundation is the owner in part with the surgeons.
Okay, and so that's how you have autonomy in how you do the service and your market area and all those things of a business, right?
It's a partnership, so the board of the LLC would make those decisions.
Okay. I think that's probably it. That's all. Thank you. Okay. I think we're done with our questions, and we would open up for public comment. Did you have anything else? No? Okay. Okay. I don't have any speaker slips in the room. Do we have anyone online?
We do have one person online via phone. If this is the item that you'd like to speak on, to raise your hand, it's *9, then *6 to unmute yourself. So if this is the item that you'd like to speak on, press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. No hand raised.
Okay, we will close the public hearing on this item. And that brings it back to the commission. I'm assuming staff has no comments regarding public points, and so it's back to our commission for deliberations. Who wants to start? Commissioner Reed, are you home districting?
Yeah, thank you. As I said before, I think the structural part of this building is I would support that, and the parking I have no problems with. Just the one question I will address. Actually, they were kind of, I think the door opened with Mr. Seward's comment that the surrounding community is at our discretion, so I will say the surrounding area goes all the way through Santa Maria. And you said you don't get into business activities all that much, which also means that you do sometimes. I've since been told, though, we can't condition this based on business. I'm getting the look, so I will not pursue that. But I would invite applicant I know you're providing an important service. I know it's also a necessary service because I'm familiar with the wait times are to try to get into local centers. I know you have, great physicians, so I just would like the community to be assured that the purpose for constructing this facility isn't just to take the easy patients, the better reimbursed patients away from local institutions that would also serve them and which would use the greater reimbursements from those to help offer more services to patients in need. I noticed, Mr. Davidson, you mentioned a 40% target for growth in this area. So I would hope that this group will demonstrate to the community that they're taking a representative slice of the patient population, not skimming off just the most profitable ones. So with that, like I said, I would invite transparency and continued participation and actually becoming a viable part of the overall community, and perhaps recruitment of local physicians for your center will help do that. And making the center available to local physicians as well, since I think one of the things you correctly stated, our local facility is very heavily booked and with prospects of growing patients population. So hopefully we will see a future of peaceful and equitable coexistence between the Marion medical community and Cottage. So with that said, I believe I'm prepared to support this project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Park?
I've got a one-up Commissioner Reed on one point. He did earlier speak of his experience with Cottage Hospital in the 1950s. My first experience at Cottage Hospital was being born there in 1953, and then observing my children being born there at subsequent years. I look at this finding we have to make for the CUP, and I want to take it seriously. I would note that on the cannabis dispensary project that Commissioner Martinez referred to, we had a lot of neighborhood people come out and speak to that. And we did to this site for our initial review as well. So we've learned about the neighborhood. And we have information from all that I think bears on this point. One, no one spoke out against this today. There's a substantial number of elderly people that live in various kinds of housing just to the south of this. I think they'll really appreciate having this center right there so close to them. The traffic light that the ownership had to spend a lot of money on there on Clark gives great access off of Clark into this center, and it is right off the freeway. So I think that'll be of great convenience to everybody. I know there was some environmental, I guess we would call it litigation, over EIRs and whatnot over this project when it was approved. It kind of seemed to me that was more of a competition because it was filed by, wasn't it labor union for the grocery store workers? And what exactly it had to do with environmental concerns, I don't know, but I don't think that the fact that litigation was filed at one time and dealt with environmental concerns mean that those concerns really exist for this project. So I think that when we look at that finding we have to make with regard to welfare of the community and compatibility, I think this is a project that seems to have very positive impact on the health and welfare of the community there, and even the community in the broader sense, and is compatible. So I will support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I failed to note that one of our commissioners has to leave very soon, so I'm hoping we can wrap up our deliberations and possibly get to a motion before we lose Commissioner Cooney, but I don't want to rush everybody. So Commissioner Martinez, do you have anything to add to deliberations, or are we ready for a motion?
No, I have nothing to add. My concerns regarding parking have been adequately addressed in my mind. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Cooney, did you have anything to add? No. It sounds like, and my questions were answered, so it looks like we're ready for a motion. Commissioner Reed, you want to take a stab?
Right, I'm trying to find my page. Where is the,
Oh, that's the wrong thing. Wait.
wait a second. Got it.
Here. Got it.
Okay. Yes. I would move that we make the required findings for approval of the project specified in Attachment A, attached to the staff report, including CEQA findings, that we determine is reflective in the CEQA findings. The documents are adequate in environmental review, and no subsequent EIR or negative declaration shall be prepared for the project, and that we approve the project case numbers 24 CUP 19, 24 AMD 9, and 24 LLA 2, subject to the conditions included as attachments B1, B2, and B3. And I would further invite, as I mentioned, applicant to become a viable part of the local medical community, not an outpost. So, thank you.
Very good. Do we have a second? Look, Commissioner Cooney's light is on.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, then let's do a roll call.
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Park.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
Chair Bradley.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a short break while we say adieu to Commissioner Cooney. He's not here for our ordinance line. Thank you. Thank you for reconvening Santa Barbara County Planning Commission of March 12th. We are here for our last item. Thank you, staff, for waiting patiently, and it's all on you to talk about these emergency shelter ordinance amendments. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle.
that's right.
The following is a hearing on the request of the Planning and Development Department for the County Planning Commission to consider making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding the adoption of emergency shelter zoning ordinance amendments to comply with new state laws and implement Program 9 of Chapter 5 of the 2023-2031 Housing Element Update, and to determine that the ordinance amendments, case numbers 24 ORD 21, 22, and 22, are exempt from the provisions of SEQA pursuant to sections 15061B3 and 15265 of the state guidelines for implementation of CEQA.
Thank you. I have a bizarre request. You know that pile of paper I just gave you? I think this staff report is at the bottom. Can you hand that back to me? So human. Thank you. All righty, let's continue with staff's presentation.
Great. Good morning, Chair Bridley and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Eva Marrero, and I will be presenting the emergency shelters zoning ordinance amendments to you today. Planning staff presented the project to your commission on January 29th and has since re-examined state laws concerning emergency shelters. This presentation covers the revised project and new staff recommendations. The emergency shelter amendments consist of two principal components, as shown on the slide. Firstly, staff proposes that the county rely on its existing emergency shelter capacity to accommodate its need for emergency shelters throughout the 2023 to 2031 housing element. As explained in the staff memorandum dated March 4th, jurisdictions may forego allowing emergency shelters with a ministerial permit in zones that allow residential uses if existing emergency shelters within their jurisdiction have sufficient capacity to accommodate their most recent point-in-time count. Therefore, staff no longer recommends amending the zoning ordinances to allow emergency shelters with a ministerial permit. Secondly, staff proposes to amend the Land Use and Development Code and the Coastal Zoning Ordinance to achieve the following: to add 4 objective development standards that would apply to new emergency shelters, and to update the definitions of emergency shelter and low barrier navigation center to comply with current state law. We'll now begin with the review of existing emergency shelter capacity. State law requires jurisdictions to have sufficient emergency shelter capacity to meet their most recent homeless point-in-time count throughout the current housing element cycle. The 2024 point-in-time count shows that the homeless population in the unincorporated county totals 261 people. The graph on this slide shows the distribution of the homeless population over time by North County and South Coast. Planning and Development and County Community Services Department staff compiled an inventory of existing emergency shelters located in the unincorporated county and on county-owned sites, which are shown on the following 2 slides. This slide shows the 6 existing emergency shelters located on county-owned sites, both within incorporated cities and within unincorporated areas. These shelters contribute a total of 346 beds to the county's existing capacity. In addition, staff counted 1 existing emergency shelter located on privately owned land within an unincorporated area of the county. This slide shows the total number of emergency shelters and beds in the county's inventory of emergency shelters. These 7 shelters operate year-round and have a total capacity of 371 beds. This number exceeds the county's 2024 point-in-time count by 110 beds. However, based on existing contracts, Dignity Moves, Hope Village, and La Posada are all slated to close before the end of the current housing element cycle, and as a result, the county may lack adequate emergency shelter capacity beginning in late December 2028. This slide shows the county's revised emergency shelter capacity after accounting for the closure of these 3 shelters. By late December of 2028, after the closures of Dignity Moves and Hope Village, the county could have 240 beds, or a shortfall of 21 beds. And by April 2029, after the closure of La Posada, the county could have only 160 beds, falling short of the 2024 point-in-time count by 101 beds. Given the length of time between now and December 2028, staff does not recommend that the board take immediate action on the potential future shortfall of emergency shelters. Rather, staff recommends that the board review its emergency shelter capacity by mid-2028 and take 1 or more actions at that time if it lacks sufficient capacity to fully accommodate its 2024 or more recent point-in-time count for the remainder of the housing element cycle. And these actions could include identifying an additional county-owned site or sites for emergency shelters, extending existing contracts for emergency shelters located on county-owned sites, or amending the zoning ordinances to allow emergency shelters with a ministerial permit in a select number of zones. Now we will move into the proposed amendments to the LUDC and the CZO. State law allows the county to apply up to 8 objective development standards to new emergency shelters. As discussed at the hearing on January 29th, staff proposes to allow the following 4 objective standards to emergency shelters: sufficient parking, interior or exterior waiting and client intake areas, on-site management, and proximity to other shelters. The zoning amendments also require emergency shelters to comply with all objective policies and development standards that currently apply to residential uses in each zone. Also discussed at the hearing on January 29th, the amendments propose to amend the definitions of emergency shelter and low barrier navigation center to comply with new state law. The proposed LUDC and CZO amendments are exempt from environmental review, given that they have no possibility of significant effect on the environment. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission take the following actions, as articulated on page 2 of the staff memorandum dated March 4th. Firstly, make the required findings for approval. Secondly, determine the projects are exempt from CEQA. Third, adopt a resolution recommending board approval of case number 24 ORD 21 as revised, and adopt a resolution recommending approval of case number 24 ORD 22. And that concludes our presentation today, and I'd like to open it up for questions.
I have several, but I want to hear from the other commissioners. Commissioner Park?
I really appreciate the information that you've provided here. It kind of boils down important stuff to just a few pages. And my questions probably won't impact at all how I'll vote on this, but it's just, I think, important to understand what you've presented us. So first of all, what is an emergency shelter? Is it just a place somebody goes in a rainstorm or something, or can people go there every night? What's it mean?
Commissioner Park, an emergency shelter is housing to accommodate the homeless population, and it's unrelated to shelter for disaster-related events.
Okay, so what's the emergency angle then? Do they have to wait for an emergency to go there, or can they go there at other times?
I think they can go there anytime.
Yeah. Commissioner Park, through the chair. So the emergency shelters are basically, the ones we're having here are open year-round.
Yeah.
And they're intended to house homeless individuals or families. One of the changes that we've seen is that emergency shelters in the past used to have a fairly limited function. But some of the changes in state law, which are included in the update of emergency shelters here, actually allow a broader range of functions. And primarily, some of those relate to the services that are provided at an emergency shelter. So they can provide counseling services, for example. They can provide employment services. They can provide mental care. So that's part of the reason the definition you're seeing before you today has been expanded to include things like navigation centers and respite care. So the function, again, has been expanded to allow a broader range of services to homeless individuals and families.
On your slide 4, it shows apparently for 2024, the point-in-time count was 261 for unincorporated area. Would that include places like the Santa Maria River encampment that really is not even in the county, but folks there are oriented, of course, to Santa Maria? So does it capture that?
Yeah, they do capture that, and we're waiting for the results of the 2025 to come out. They conduct the point-in-time survey in January of each year, but they do a comprehensive look, and then they break it down into jurisdictions. So what you're seeing here in terms of the numbers, that's for the unincorporated county. There are additional figures and, of course, additional homeless people who are within incorporated cities.
Well, I was wondering how that relates in the next slide, which must be 5, right? It shows the existing capacity, and the first 2 shelters there are in cities. One's in the city of Santa Barbara, one's in the city of Santa Maria. So when it says, for example, at Hope Village, city of Santa Maria, that's where it's located, and it's got and it says 97 beds. Is that 97 beds for both homeless from the unincorporated area and from the city?
Yeah, so they don't, typically, it's a very fluid situation where people are coming back and forth between unincorporated areas and incorporated areas. So there's no borders. Right. So what the state law recognizes, and this is key to us satisfying our emergency shelter needs in the unincorporated county, is that they recognize that jurisdictions may have, such as counties, may have shelters that are actually on county property within incorporated areas. And they allow the county to count that toward their provision and their capacity for accommodating homeless individuals. So while across the street we have Hope Village, we're clearly within the city of Santa Maria, but that's on county property. It's within its jurisdiction. And according to the government code, we can then count that toward our capacity. And we have several other sites like the one in Santa Barbara.
Dignity
Moves is another case where the county has used its resources, it's used its land to accommodate homeless individuals and shelters. So again, the way the law is structured is you can count that toward the county can count those toward its emergency shelter capacity.
I got it. So there are other shelters in city of Santa Barbara or city of Santa Maria that you're not counting because they're not on county property.
That's correct.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Well, so it shows the existing now is 346 beds.
Commissioner Park, that's the existing now on county-owned sites, but then we do have a additional shelter that we can count, which is on in the unincorporated Goleta Valley. That's Domestic Violence Solutions for Santa Barbara.
Oh, right.
And so then if you look at the third table, that's the grand total of capacity, which is 371 beds.
This next question is going to seem so simple that you might think it's facetious, but it's not. I mean, if we have a point-in-time count of 261 and we have capacity of 346, why do we see so many homeless that are not in these beds?
Well, I think it's a complex
I agree.
situation. I mean, some people, as we know, who are homeless simply won't accept accommodations in shelters. It's not something that they prefer. They prefer to live in unsheltered areas. So I think that's part of the issue. There's also some acknowledgement that the point-in-time count is not perfect. And if you talk to some of the folks in CSD, that is the county's community services department that deal with homelessness on a day-to-day basis, they'll say the numbers are not reflective of the actual population. And the population shifts quite a bit too. I mean, we know that individuals from, say, San Luis Obispo County come down and may be housed across the street. So again, it gets into a very fluid situation in terms of where people are at any point in time.
Well, once again, I want to thank you for this well-presented information that really increases my understanding of what's going on. So I have no further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinez, did you have?
Yes. Well, I'll start by, I'm really looking at the memorandum that we have which was dated March 4th. And I appreciate the situation of where the staff went and re-looked and assessed what we got here and in regards to the situation of telling us now about the future action that may be needed in relation to this. What I'm really concerned about when I'm looking at this and I'm trying to understand this is part of the recommendations is to adopt certain resolutions. And Commissioner Park was kind of hinting at this in regards to emergency shelters. So what we're looking at is changing the definition of emergency shelters from, for instance, a permanent supervised shelter to minimal supportive services. So are these required languages? I'm looking at attachment C, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages into it. Well, page 4 of Exhibit 1 of attachment C is where I'm at. Is this mandatory language that we're looking at putting in here? Because the way I'm reading these things is these are emergency shelters which are not going to have the supervision and they can have minimal supervision. And my reflection on that is, and I've just had some experiences with these things because of the different organizations I've been involved in, is some homeless people, they do not want to stay in shelters because they have that supervision. They don't want to bend to those rules. They say, I'd rather be somewhere else. So my reading of this language is say, well, okay, we're going to bend to you now and we're going to provide homeless shelters, but you're going to be able to do what you really want to do. Is this where this legislation is heading? Because it says minimal supportive services for homeless persons.
So Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, I think that where we get to see some of the supervision written is in the development standards that are included as part of these amendments. So if you go up, I'm also looking at the attachment C, Exhibit 1, and the section right above gives you a third development standard that specifies a minimum of 1 employee shall be on the premises during all hours of operation, and a 24 emergency contact person shall also be designated for the shelter. And to answer your question about the language, that is the state language and definition for emergency shelter that we've included.
Yeah, I noticed that language, and I was even concerned by that language because there's it ends with the period after it says, employees shall be on the premises during hours that the emergency shelter is in operation. Well, there's no definition that an emergency shelter is in operation 24 hours because sometimes they have people in there and sometimes they don't. So I don't imagine, it's not saying 24 hours. And when you look at the bold, it says on-site employee and emergency contact person, which I think is kind of deceptive because the last sentence is talking about a 24-hour person contact. That reminds me of that whole YMCA thing about if you have a complaint about somebody being at the YMCA, you're going to have somebody that you're going to be able to contact. So it doesn't, am I reading this right, that it doesn't really require a person to be on premises 24 hours? It just says somebody during operating hours, which whatever that's defined at, that's the only time you have to have somebody there. Otherwise, nobody has to be there. Am I reading that right?
I think that's, Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, that's correct. That's the way it's written now.
Yeah. And that's what's, and this is mandatory language that's being given to us from the state. Am I hearing that right? Or do we have some discretion here?
There is discretion when it comes to it. Basically, what the government code does is it very generally lays out 8 kind of topics in which jurisdictions can apply objective standards. So, for example, when they talk about parking, they don't prescribe the number of parking spaces. They say this is an area, a topic that a local jurisdiction may regulate, they can come up with. So they've really kind of put some sideboards on the objective standards that jurisdictions can apply to emergency shelters. So within those, there is discretion. Mm-hmm. So what we did is we worked with the Community Services Department, again, the staff that work and actually oversee some of the operations, to come up with these. And kind of what their concern was is that we not be overly prescriptive. So we tried to kind of provide and select the standards that we thought were appropriate and then provide a standard for that. Okay. Again, we have some discretion. They're not prescribed in state law other than laying out the 8 areas where we can apply objective standards.
Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, and I would just add that regarding the language, the intention is there that there would be on-site supervision at any time, as it said, operating hours, or operational. So if there are homeless people present and using the facility, then there would be on-site supervision. So the intention is there that there would never be a situation per that development standard when there were people present in the shelter unsupervised.
And I appreciate that clarity, because that's what I would anticipate and would want to see more defined within these things, because people have a way of, taking their liberties with definitions. I mean, that's the profession I'm in. So, I mean, we're always looking at something of that sort. But I'm also looking in regards to what is the respite and recuperative care. When I was looking up respite care, and respite care is more for, as defined, is for the caregivers to have some time off. And so I'm confused as to what that means. Respite or recuperative care is I'm looking for your help in defining that and me understanding it. And what is a navigation center?
So Commissioner Martinez, through the chair. So beginning with the navigation center, we do have a definition of low barrier navigation center, and that's provided. And so what they did, what the legislature and the governor did, is when they made recent amendments, again, they expanded the definition of emergency shelter to include navigation centers. So essentially we have emergency shelters. We also have a revised definition of low barrier navigation center. So low barrier navigation centers through these amendments become essentially a subset of emergency shelters. Low barrier navigation centers, again, are an opportunity to provide housing for homeless individuals. But one of the key distinctions is that they're intended to provide more than just housing. They provide a wide range of services to homeless individuals. And they also reduce some of the barriers that some homeless individuals find objectable and don't go to shelters because of that. So, for example, oftentimes they'll allow them to bring personal possessions and have storage for personal items. They'll allow individuals with pets to come into the facility. They'll have individuals that may have a partner or a spouse to come into the facility. So the idea with low barrier means they're trying to remove some of the obstacles and some of the functions and regulations that some types of emergency shelters have that discourage people from actually taking advantage of the services and providing shelter. So again, it's not just supposed to be shelter, it's supposed to be shelter with services and the fewest barriers possible.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but that's a pretty broad definition of low barriers. I mean, that's just my own personal comment. You can even forget about that. But,
Yeah.
But I still don't
Martinez.
understand what respite and recuperative care centers are about.
Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, just one thing to further add on the low barrier. So a separate section of our code, which was adopted a year or so ago, which we don't get into today, is a set of criteria and specific provisions for which Low Barrier Navigation Center have to comply with in order to be licensed and permitted. So there are specific state requirements that Low Barrier Navigation Centers have to meet in order to provide their services.
Yeah.
So that's separately regulated. But as far as the respite and recuperative care, you know, we're not emergency shelter providers, so we might not be the best people to answer that question. It is language that comes straight from the state as far as what an emergency shelter can provide and what services it can offer. I don't know that we have much more information beyond that.
Well, the reason I'm asking these questions is because I'm a bit uncomfortable. Well, I'm not a bit. I am uncomfortable in regards to the language that's included here. And I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to be hard. Is my business is right next to some of these kind of places. I deal with it every day in regards to some of these people who say, I don't want these barriers. And I'm next to it where those people who don't want their barriers placed upon their wishes upon other people, and it's not a happy experience in relation to it. So I can only imagine if I'm a resident and I'm in a house, and this is where I'm looking at, so you know where I'm coming from, and somebody says, we're going to put a low barrier place right by you. What does that mean, and who's going to come into my neighborhood? I mean, people build their houses or live in the places that they have, and they're raising their children, and they're having, okay, and now I have this new element. That is what's giving me pause here. My business is where it's at. It's been there forever, and it is what it is, and I'm dealing with it. But I have problems with these definitions, and I have problems with them not allowing a lot of latitude in regards to supervision of these places. And thank you. Those were my questions regarding the resolutions. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Martinez, if I could, through the chair, if I could just add one more bit of information, which is that just contrary to how we started this project back in January, we're not proposing any changes with regard to where these facilities could be permitted. So there are already existing permit avenues in place for whether it's a low barrier navigation center or an emergency shelter. They're permitted with different permit types depending on what they are and where they're located. So that is not being changed as part of this package before you. Really what we're doing is just try to comply with the state law with regard to the language of the definitions, which really would, again, have no bearing on where these facilities are located or how they're regulated and permitted. And then the objective standards that are being added, currently there are no standards. So with the emergency shelters that do come through our permit process currently, there really are no specific standards by which to evaluate them. And so we're adding these additional standards on top of what other standards might apply, like with regard to setbacks and building height and things that would normally get applied to a residential type of use. So you can look at this as providing some standards where currently there are none, and in a way strengthening our regulatory authority over these types of facilities.
So, it says state law also includes 2 alternative means to meet the most recent PIT count. So we're at the ministerial permit process right now, correct? Or are we changing that?
Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, we're not touching the permit process as part of your package today.
Okay, so what is the process as we speak today for a permit of this situation? If so I can understand.
Consistent with state law, low barrier navigations are allowed with a ministerial permit in zones that allow for multifamily or non-residential zones that allow for mixed use or multifamily. And that was a package of amendments that were adopted by the board, like I said, about a year ago. Emergency shelters are permitted with either a land use permit or a minor conditional use permit in a handful of zones. And Ms. Marrero can indicate or share with you which zones those are and which specific permit types those are.
Okay, just so I understand, because I don't do these things, is if I want to, what's required for a ministerial permit? Somebody just go in there and turn in a piece of paper and they get it, or what happens? What's the process is really what I'm asking.
Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, you submit an application, a permit application. You have to demonstrate compliance with the code. And in the case of low barrier navigation centers, as I mentioned, the code outlines certain criteria that have to be met in terms of the services that are provided, the regulations in place to manage those facilities, how large they can be, which zones they can be permitted in. You go through the permit process. What makes it ministerial is that the standards are objective, and there's no possibility for appeal. So that's really what makes it ministerial. Is it's a staff level review and approval for the Low Barrier Navigation Center. If they meet the standards, then they get their permit.
And no notice to the surrounding.
And no notice to surrounding neighbors.
Okay.
Emergency shelters are not ministerial. They require either a land use permit or a CUP, which are noticed, are appealable, and there's some further levels of review associated with that.
Okay, thank you. That helps me understand the process. Thank you.
Okay, and I do have a pile of questions. Let's wrap it up. Not wrap it up. It's your turn, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you.
I've just been waiting a long time to ask these questions.
Interesting you look at me when you say and wrap it up. Okay, couple of simple questions. Yeah, I have to praise you for the transformation and what we're looking at today compared to the prior hearing. I think the fact that the ministerial approval process that we looked at before has been set aside will be much more comforting to potential neighbors of these facilities, although we do find reassurance in the fact that we have capacity to handle homeless. First, I notice you say you would recommend staff addresses any shortfalls beginning mid-2028. I would question as to if you really think that's early enough, or given the lightning speed with which we achieve things, you think going to early 2028 might be better? Just a question. Okay, secondly, if I'm looking at the Attachment C, Exhibit 1, page 4 of the proposed ordinance amendment, are the things under D, development standards, and then Section 3, the different definitions, that's the totality of what we're going to be approving with our vote today? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the development standards, the parking standards is referred to in the table that's provided previously, the waiting and intake areas, employee and emergency contact person, and proximity, that's handled. And with respect to the two definitions given before, I think as was revealed during Commissioner Martinez's questioning, this language came from the state. I do have a question about the definition for emergency shelter. In the former language, which is now lined out, it said it may provide temporary accommodations up to 30 consecutive days or 90 days within a 12-month period. Since that lined out, is there no time limitation now on emergency shelters, since most people's expectation of an emergency shelter is that it's temporary? So are the time limits now eliminated?
Commissioner Reed, that is correct. And P&D staff, we discussed with CSD staff who are dealing with the emergency shelters more closely than we are. And in the 8 optional development standards that the state allows us to apply to emergency shelters, one of them is the length of stay, and that's an optional provision that we can include. And in our discussions with the CSD staff, they let us know that in certain cases, they sometimes think that the 30 consecutive days standard that we had earlier in the definition for emergency shelter was not enough in what they were finding for some of the patients or clients at these shelters to kind of get the support that they needed before leaving the shelter. And so it was their recommendation to not include a length of stay clause.
Commissioner Reed, through the chair, and I would just add, I think from the planning perspective, the use is an emergency shelter, whether someone is staying there 30 days and then leaving, and someone new comes in and stays 30 days and then leaves. The use exists. So I think our feeling was whether someone's there for 30 days or 45 days was really irrelevant. If there's people that stay longer or if they're coming and going more regularly, that to leave it up to the service providers to be able to manage that with a little greater flexibility.
Okay, so you don't see that there's a sufficiently high number of individuals who might occupy these centers for more than 30 days would have a sufficient impact to reduce availability to a less than acceptable level?
I think the feeling in talking with CSD and from a planning perspective was to allow for that flexibility so that operators can work with their clients in the way that best serves their needs.
Okay, so that the longer period people aren't really creating a supply problem then?
It's not affecting the point in time count, whether someone's there for 30 days or 45 days, or 60 days.
And Commissioner Reed, through the chair, the other factor we did give some consideration to is a practical standpoint of enforcement. If you're going to go in and start tracking the length of stay of an individual in a shelter, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of people, hundreds of beds. We just felt like that really wasn't a practical approach for us. Again, the use is the use. It's capped by the number of beds that are in the facility. So whether that's occupied by one individual or several individuals over a month or several months didn't seem to make any difference from a planning and land use perspective.
Okay, and one last one. Could you explain this one? In the definition for low barrier navigation center, the underlying sentence, a low barrier navigation center may be non-congregate and relocatable. Can you explain exactly what that means?
Yes, Commissioner Reed, through the chair. By non-congregate, that definition means that each family or individual gets a separate quarters, so separated space.
Okay. How about the relocatable part?
I think that relates to facilities that are perhaps like a pallet shelter or something like that.
Yeah. Like you see across the street here, which are movable structures, not permanent structures.
Oh, okay. That was my question, other than one could be moved and put in next to Commissioner Martinez's office without his knowledge. Oh, okay. Because that space is occupied. That's the extent of my questions. Thank you.
Okay. So I know a lot of this it kind of starts with data, and the city of Santa Barbara's had a really pretty aggressive housing amelioration program for several decades. So on the existing capacity total sites from your PowerPoint, I'm wondering why places like Salvation Army, Rescue Mission, and Transition House weren't picked up. Those are all very successful models, and they all are doing this exact thing. They've been doing it for at least 35 years. So are those funneled into just the city of Santa Barbara stats, or?
Yeah, Chair Bradley, Commissioners, presumably the city of Santa Barbara would be taking credit for those spaces because they're within their jurisdiction, and we can't take credit for them because we have no control. They're not on county-owned land, unlike these others.
But these others aren't, like, under existing capacity, these are some that aren't on county land.
No,
right?
they all are either within our jurisdiction or are on county-owned land
Oh,
within a particular
Okay.
city. So, for example, across the street, we're in the city of Santa Maria, but that is county-owned property. so we
I
can-
see. Okay,
We
I
can take credit
misunderstood.
for it.
Okay, all right. Well,
that's the distinction.
my biggest relief was when this first came to us, you know, the proposal was in residential zones, and that's why I wanted to continue it, so that Commissioner Park could be here, because I'm thinking of all our districts, you know, that would have been a pretty major rollout. So I'm very, very relieved that you went back and looked at this capacity issue and kind of reeled that back. I agree with the 2028, you know, kind of re-examine it. I think that the La Posada and the Dignity Moves projects are probably not going to move as much as they said that. And we're always hopeful, and when you talk to homeless providers, they're always hopeful that they're going to solve the problem, but I don't think it's going to be solved. I think this is just part of our population that we have to accommodate somewhere, somehow. Dignity Moves is brilliant in how they've done it, and they leverage so much federal money that they can do it where a lot of other smaller nonprofits cannot. So I think it's a great program. I'm relieved that it's not something that I have to explain to people in the second district. Oh yeah, and by the way, you know, that empty lot down, that's going to be bought and turned into, you know, a low barrier navigation center on your corner right across from the school. You know, so that's a little bit of a relief for now. Let's see how it goes, and it's a year-to-year thing. So anyway, all that said, I would support your proposed amendments if someone wants to make a motion. Well, public comment. What am I thinking?
We did have a hand up earlier.
Okay.
Emily Allen, did you still wish to speak on this item?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Chair and Planning Commission, I just wanted to, recuperative care. My name is Emily Allen. I'm the interim homeless assistance program manager for the county. And just wanted to share that recuperative care is a project where we work with typically hospitals, but healthcare providers for people who are exiting hospitals to have a safe place to go and receive medical attention. And we have recuperative care beds at the Hope Village project. They're, you know, can be very successful in helping people to stabilize and reduce, you know, returns to homelessness. So I wanted to add that, but that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bringing it, close the public, unless there's anyone else online.
No additional speakers.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to anyone who wants to make a motion to support staff's package.
Me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion that we make the required findings for approval, determine the projects are exempt from CEQA, adopt a resolution recommending board approval of case number 24ORD21 revised, and adopt a resolution recommending approval of case numbers 240RD22. 240RD22.
I'll second the motion.
Great. Do we want to roll call it?
Commissioner Park.
Aye.
Commissioner Reed.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
I'm going to say no because I'm really think that we have some work to do on the ordinances, but I'm going to say nay.
Chair Bradley.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, and we can adjourn to next week. Here in Santa Maria. We will be back. Thank you.